Earthquake hit Sichuan province. At least 21 people now have been killed after the magnitude 6.8 quake struck Luding County. Now let's get back to our discussions about the Trade and Services Fair that's just wrapped up in Beijing. Let's talk to Li Yong, who's a senior fellow at the China
Hello and welcome to CGTN's special coverage of the race to decide the next leader of the UK Conservative Party and the person who will be the country's next Prime Minister. We're now just minutes away from learning who will replace Boris Johnson and lead the country at a time when it's facing multiple challenges, including the cost of living crisis, looming strikes and soaring inflation. Well, let's take you now to the Queen Elizabeth Conference Centre in Westminster. We're looking at live pictures of the inside of that building where the announcement is about to be made. The contest began when Boris Johnson was forced to resign after a series of scandals. 8 candidates threw their hats in the ring. Now just 2 remain: Foreign Secretary Liz Truss and ex-Finance Minister Rishi Sunak. Grassroots Conservative Party members have cast their votes, and the result is expected any minute now. Well, let's head over to Westminster, where we can speak to our correspondent, Michael Voss. Michael, will the next Conservative Party leader be Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss? What are we expecting?
Well, Robin, let's have a look. Less than 10 minutes to go before we find out who will be the next Prime Minister taking over here at the House of Commons behind me. We're told that both candidates have now been informed of the results of the vote, and that will be announced, we're told, at, I believe, 12:37 local time. Now, obviously, the Finance Minister, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is the clear favourite to win this, but the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is hoping for a major upset. What today's vote does is make the winner the leader of the Conservative Party, but they won't become Prime Minister until tomorrow, Tuesday. They have to go and present their credentials to the Queen. Now, normally, this takes place at Buckingham Palace here in London, but the Queen is still at her summer residence in Scotland. She's 96 years old and has mobility problems, so in a big break in tradition, both Boris Johnson will have to fly first to Scotland to hand in his resignation, and then the winner of this contest will then fly to Scotland to formally be appointed Prime Minister. We're expecting then some very rapid announcements. Certainly Liz Truss has said that within a matter of days, possibly as early as Thursday, she will announce a major package of support for people over the cost of living crisis. Rishi Sunak has pretty much said the same. He as Chancellor, provided a major multi-billion-dollar support package during COVID when the country went into lockdown, and has promised to do the same. The big difference between the two, I think, is on tax. Certainly Liz Truss is very much of a low tax person. She's committed to lowering taxes. Rishi Sunak saying you can't do it right now. You can't do lower taxes until inflation gets underway. So that perhaps is the major difference. But as I say, we will find out in a matter of minutes now who will be the next Prime Minister. Robin.
Michael Voss in Westminster, thank you very much. Well, whoever takes over from Boris Johnson has a very full in-tray that few would envy. Our correspondent Juliet Mann helps us go through the long to-do list that awaits the new leader in number 10 Downing Street.
The economy has to be top. This year, inflation has already hit a 40-year high, and the economy has been shrinking. The UK is widely tipped to experience a technical recession later this year. The Bank of England forecasts a huge downturn between October and December, with a contraction of almost 1%. That all affects the cost of living. The new PM will face the UK's largest drop in real income since the 1950s. Soaring food and energy prices are further deepening the crisis. Economists expect the next person in charge will need to do yet more to help households and save the struggling economy. And of course, there's also the continuing fallout over Brexit, and especially what's going to happen with regards to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Boris was apparently happy to break European law to get what he wanted. Will his successor feel the same? Remember, one of the pitches for Brexit was being able to trade freely with the rest of the world. But since Britain left the European Union, the number of UK-EU trading relationships has seen a steep decline due to regulatory red tape. The UK government's spending watchdog has said changes from Brexit may have been a factor in the UK lagging behind all other G7 economies in its post-pandemic recovery. One legacy the outgoing British Prime Minister will leave behind is leading Britain's response to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Britain's helping hand led to Ukrainians hailing Boris as a hero, even naming a street after him in a small town on the outskirts of Odessa. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will be hoping this solidarity continues once the new leader steps in.
Well, our correspondent Andrew Wilson is here in the studio with me. So, Andrew, whoever ends up taking over as leader of the Conservative Party, as the new Prime Minister, will have a very full to-do list, as we were saying there. What will they pick on first?
It's a huge task. And what's interesting with the dynamic of the leadership competition that we're seeing this time round, because we've seen so many recently, is that the campaigning over the summer became tiresome, I think, for the general public. It wasn't addressed to them, it was addressed to party membership. And so there tended to be, in the last weeks of August, a lack of interest in the competition as it went on. Within that competition also, by the middle of August, the two campaigning parties have pretty much decided who was going to win. The Truss camp was so positive that they were ahead and couldn't be beaten by the Sunak camp, that they started turning their attention to making plans, because they know there's an awful lot to be done. If we can see now into the conference centre, yes, there it is. That's the party chairman, Andrew Stevenson, just introducing now. He'll be followed by Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, who will announce the result. We understand that both candidates have already been told the result. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because there'll be an awful lot of ministers and ex-ministers and future ministers in that crowd now on their phones, swapping that information around, and there's no sign of that at the moment. They're all still applauding. But within that crowd, there will be those that are about to lose their jobs and those that are about to get the dream jobs of the century once Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak takes over and makes their choices for cabinet. But as you say, what's lying ahead? Well, briefly, the list is long. And also the list is colossal in terms of how much it's going to cost to deal with it and how difficult politically it's going to be to deal with it. You've got the cost of living. You've got the NHS facing a winter crisis. You've got the Ukraine war. Where does Britain stand on the Ukraine war going forward? We know that President Zelensky has established quite a relationship with Boris Johnson. Will he establish a similar relationship with the new member in Downing Street once that starts? Northern Ireland's still in a deadlock. No one wants that job. They've tried twice already to figure out who's going to be the Northern Ireland Secretary. Both have turned them down, including Penny Mordaunt, one of the previous candidates. Scottish independence, Indy Ref 2, is still there as well. And also behind all of this are net zero commitments for 2050, mixed with the energy crisis. A lot of decisions to be made.
Well, as you say, an enormous to-do list, but pretty much top of that list, it must be energy, mustn't it? People living in the UK facing soaring bills. How important is it that the new Prime Minister gets this right?
It's crucial. And what's interesting is that if you go back to the beginning of this leadership competition, the situation wasn't nearly as serious in the forecasts as it is now. And so it's perhaps of benefit to the country that these decisions are being made now in September, rather than being back at the beginning of June, when people still thought somehow we could ride this crisis. It's now clear the country can't ride this crisis. There's Liz Truss now there. She's been talking to energy companies about plans for how they'll deal with the energy crisis. And it seems to be that although through her campaign, here's Sir Graham Brady. I think we should listen to what Sir Graham's got to say, shall we?
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. On the 7th of July, the Prime Minister announced his resignation as leader of our party. The 1922 committee then organised 5 ballots over an 8-day period, concluding the part of the leadership election for which we have responsibility, and putting forward the candidates to the National Convention and CCHQ for the programme of hustings all over the United Kingdom and the ballot of the membership that is now concluded. I work closely with the board of the party, CCHQ and Civica Electoral Services to ensure that all qualifying members had the opportunity to vote, and to ensure that our ballot was secure as well as free and fair. I'd like to thank the 1922 executive, and in particular my fellow officers, Naz Ghani, Will Ragg, Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, Bob Blackman and Gary Sambrook, and our staff for all of their help and support, especially during the administration of the parliamentary rounds of voting. I would like to thank the party board and staff for all their hard work organising the hustings, which allowed so many members to see the candidates in action, whether in person or online. I'm grateful to CES for the professionalism with which they have dealt with the ballot in distributing, collecting and counting the votes, both online and by post. Finally, I want to thank all the party members who have taken this responsibility very seriously, all the candidates who put themselves forward for election, and in particular, my colleagues Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, who ran such excellent campaigns in the full glare of media scrutiny and who showed themselves to be outstanding candidates to be the leader of our party. Now the result. I, Sir Graham Brady, the returning officer for the Conservative and Unionist Party leadership election, declare that the total number of eligible voters was 172,437. The turnout in the election was 82.6%. The total number of votes rejected was 654. The total number of valid votes given to each candidate was as follows. Rishi Sunak, 60,399. Liz Truss, 81,326. Therefore, I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. Liz, come up on stage.
Well, thank you, Sir Graham. It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman, and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank my family, my friends, my political colleagues, and all of those who helped on this campaign. I'm incredibly grateful for all of your support. I'd like to pay tribute to my fellow candidates, particularly Rishi Sunak. It's been a hard-fought campaign. I think we have shown the depth and breadth of talent in our Conservative Party. And I also want to thank our outgoing leader, my friend, Boris Johnson. Boris, you got Brexit done. You crushed Jeremy Corbyn. You rolled out the vaccine and you stood up to Vladimir Putin. You were admired from Kiev to Carlisle. Friends and colleagues, thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth. I know that our beliefs resonate with the British people. Our beliefs in freedom, in the ability to control your own life, in low taxes, in personal responsibility. And I know that's why people voted for us in such numbers in 2019. And as your party leader, I intend to deliver what we promised those voters right across our great country. During this leadership campaign, I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative. And my friends, we need to show that we will deliver over the next 2 years. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply. And I will deliver on the National Health Service. But we all will deliver for our country. And I will make sure that we use all the fantastic talents of the Conservative Party, our brilliant members of Parliament and peers, our fantastic councillors, our MSs, our MSPs, all of our councillors and activists and members right across our country. Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver. And we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, as the applause continues at the Queen Elizabeth Conference Centre in Westminster, we can see there the new leader of the Conservative Party, Liz Truss, leaving the podium. She will be the UK's next Prime Minister. She becomes the Conservative Party's fourth leader in just over 6 years and will replace Boris Johnson. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Nuid Jabarkal, who is outside Downing Street, which will, of course, be the new Prime Minister's official residence once she moves in. So, Nuid, we have just heard within the last few minutes that Liz Truss, as was widely expected, will replace Boris Johnson. Tell us a bit more about the UK's next leader.
Yeah, widely expected, as you say, Robin, but perhaps not by the margin that the results came in at. She's got 57% of the vote and 43% Rishi Sunak, the other contender in this leadership contest, managed to get. I don't think many people, particularly the polls, had her far ahead. According to betting odds, Rishi Sunak only had a 2% chance of winning. Now, what does that mean? It means that governing the party, the internal politics of the Conservative Party, may be a bit more difficult for Liz Truss as she moves forward. She does have experience in government, two major roles she's had in recent years. One as the International Trade Secretary, where she tried to secure post-Brexit trade deals with not too much success. The other as Foreign Secretary. She was brought in after Dominic Raab's handling of the Afghanistan affair about a year ago, and she's led the campaign to make the UK one of the key backers of the war in Ukraine, offering support to the likes of President Zelensky and other G7 allies when it comes to the pressure that they put on Moscow. But really, this is a woman who many thought had her eye on the top job for quite some time. Here's a look at some of the key defining features of her political career.
Campaigning is net zero priority.
Liz Truss, UK Foreign Secretary for a year and now taking the top job. She held a steady lead over her centrist opponent Rishi Sunak in the national runoff to become Conservative Party leader, despite lacking initial support among her parliamentary colleagues. An illustration of how positions can change within this complicated, factional party. Truss focused her campaign on promises of immediate tax cuts across the board, corporate and personal, claiming it would spur economic growth, even as many economists challenged the approach. The economy will be the priority, with UK inflation in double figures and the cost of living crisis crippling household budgets.
Because one of the issues we are facing is a potential recession. And we know how difficult a recession can be for families up and down the country.
Fantastic.
Throughout the campaign, Truss gathered support as the established pro-Brexit candidate, channeling what many saw as a style similar to that of the most famous Conservative Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher.
And what we need to do now is deliver, deliver, deliver.
But on the global stage, her premiership faces serious challenges. She's vowed to remain Ukraine's #1 backer. Closer to home, a showdown with the EU is looming over Brexit, which she voted against. She's promised a tougher stance on dealing with Brussels over the Northern Ireland Protocol stalemate.
Now, I worked hard to get a resolution with the EU on this issue. It wasn't forthcoming, but I'm not somebody who's prepared to let the situation drift.
A popular message with her party, but it could risk legal battles and a trade war. She's also angered allies with off-the-cuff remarks.
President Macron, friend or foe?
The jury's out.
She's also pledged to get tougher with China's government and target firms like TikTok over national security concerns, comments the Chinese embassy has called, quote, irresponsible. This is the third time since 2016 Britain has a new leader. Brexit plagued Theresa May's premiership, while COVID-19 impaired Boris Johnson's. Liz Truss will have to address her own set of profound challenges, diplomatic and economic, if she's to avoid the fate of her predecessors.
I touched upon some of the foreign policy challenges facing Ms Truss when she comes into power, but really the domestic issue is going to be top of the agenda, trying to deal with inflation at a 40-year high of more than 10% and help people with the soaring cost of energy. We have heard that there will be a plan, no details given from Ms Truss, but in terms of what happens next, tomorrow she'll travel with Boris Johnson, the outgoing Prime Minister, to meet the Queen in Scotland. She'll then come back, and we're expecting a speech here sometime on Tuesday afternoon. On Wednesday, she'll meet her cabinet, and on Thursday, we're expecting to hear more details about this plan. There will be millions of people across the country watching and waiting to see what Ms Truss has to say.
Nui Jabalko in Downing Street, many thanks. Well, let's talk now to Matt Kvaltrup, who's a professor of political science and international relations at Coventry University. Matt, this will of course be a very challenging time across multiple fronts for Liz Truss. Her top priority, though, as we heard from our correspondent there, must be tackling high energy bills and giving people help with the cost of living crisis. And this is something she's changed her mind on during the campaign, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Liz Truss likes to compare herself to Margaret Thatcher. She even dresses like Margaret Thatcher. But there's a profound difference between Margaret Thatcher and Liz Truss. Margaret Thatcher famously said, "The lady is not for turning." But if you look at Liz Truss's career, it's been basically pirouetting all along. First, she was a Liberal Democrat, then she became a Conservative, then she was in favour of staying in the EU, and then she became a Brexiteer. Then at first she said she didn't want to give any handouts to people, and then she changed her mind on that too. So the problem with Liz Truss is that she does not really stick to any particular ideology. That's why she's very different from Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher, like her or loathe her, always had a particular compass, and it never really changed. That's the difference between Truss and Margaret Thatcher. It might be a good thing that you're able to and willing to change. When the facts change, I change my mind. But you get a sneaky suspicion that is opportunist, and I think the voters will be able to see through that.
Liz Truss has signalled that economically there'll be a change in direction coming. Tax cuts on the way, a move away from wealth distribution. What do you think she might do when?
I think she might try to have a few smaller tax cuts, but it's not really going to amount to anything much. And if we go back and look at the history of the United Kingdom, and in 1974, before Margaret Thatcher became leader of the then Conservative Party, made a number of tax cuts which basically ruined the economy completely. So in many ways, she is advocating the thing that got Margaret Thatcher in. Margaret Thatcher didn't just go for tax cuts. Margaret Thatcher thought the state should stay out of that. The central bank should be in charge of that. So in some ways, this is very anti-Thatcherite policies, well dressed up in many of the dresses that are similar to those of the woman we called Mrs. T or Margaret Thatcher.
And something that Liz Truss mentioned in her acceptance speech, if you like, was the NHS. She said she would deliver on the NHS, the National Health Service. What might that look like?
It probably means more money to the NHS, but then again, you have to ask the question, where does the money come from? Many people say that the NHS is the closest we have to a national religion, and therefore to say anything contrary to that would be literally sacrilegious. So she has to say something about that, but the details are extremely vague. What you would have to do is basically to allow people from foreign countries, that is from the EU, to come in and work for the NHS, because one of the main problems of the NHS is that they don't have enough people there. And for that, you need to cooperate with the European Union and for member states in the European Union, and not just alienate them by breaking international law, which is also fundamentally against the traditional principles of the Conservative Party.
OK, Matt Fortrup from Coventry University, thank you very much indeed for talking to us today.
You're welcome.
Well, let's bring you those numbers again. Liz Truss getting 57% of the party members' vote and her opponent Rishi Sunak gaining 43%, meaning that Liz Truss replaces Boris Johnson as leader of the Conservative Party, and she will become the UK's new Prime Minister. Well, our correspondent Andrew Wilson is in the studio with me. One thing we didn't talk about with Matt Fortrup there is foreign policy, particularly Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Protocol following the Brexit agreement. That's an issue that hasn't gone away, isn't it? How will she tackle that? How important is it that she gets it right?
She said that she's going to take a hard line with Brussels. She said already when she was Foreign Secretary that she wasn't going to give anything away, that Brexit was Brexit, that everyone had to honour the deal and so forth, and that the protocol was unacceptable. Now, the Northern Ireland Protocol, which effectively, as we know, creates a border down the North Sea and means that goods coming from the UK into Northern Ireland now need to be checked to prevent goods being checked going south to the EU country of Ireland, to the south of Northern Ireland. Now, that's unacceptable to the Unionists, and the Unionists have said they're not going to participate in any kind of government in Northern Ireland, in Stormont, until this issue with the protocol is resolved. Now, Liz Truss, as I said before, we were talking, has already been making plans because it was looking like she was going to win, so she's had a few weeks to start thinking about this, and she's been shopping around, I'm told, for a Northern Ireland secretary. Can't find one. A couple of people were approached, including Penny Mordaunt, who was a candidate who fell away from the competition earlier on, and they don't want to do it. Now, that might be because it's a poison chalice, because the trouble is that the protocol is indeed jamming up the politics of Northern Ireland. It's preventing a government being formed, and they're running out of time. 28th of October is the deadline before Northern Ireland has to go back for another election if they still haven't been able to form a government. So the clock is ticking on that one. Now, the other issue facing Westminster is that by and large, the protocol is proving popular in Northern Ireland. It's not popular with the Unionists, but it's popular by and large with the other parties in Northern Ireland and with the business community. So how will she tackle that? It's just one of the long list of issues. You mentioned foreign policy, of course, and Ukraine has an awful lot of momentum going with it. Boris Johnson was instrumental not only in expressing support for Ukraine and uniting NATO and the European Union around that support for Ukraine, but was also instrumental either in supplying weapons and other kinds of ordnance for the Ukrainian forces, but also persuading other nations to do the same. And when England or Britain couldn't come up with a certain amount of ordnance, they would persuade others through Boris Johnson to come up with those that materiel for the Ukrainians. That will be sorely missed if that momentum isn't kept going. We saw Boris Johnson in Kiev just a few days ago, and there they were saying they still treat him as if he is going to carry on being Prime Minister. So that's something else that Liz Truss has to think long and hard about, what position she wants to make on the Ukrainian situation, because everyone will be watching to see what Britain wants to do next.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, let's find out how the European Union is reacting to the news that Liz Truss will be the new UK Prime Minister. Let's talk to our correspondent, Alex Cadier, in Brussels. So, Alex, what's the reaction been where you are?
Well, the reaction at the moment is what we've been seeing for the last few weeks from the European Union. The first reaction we saw at the midday briefing in that building behind me, the European Commission's chief spokesperson, Eric Mamère, saying that he was asked if they're hoping for a new beginning with the Truss government. He said, we're always looking for new beginnings and improving the relationship with the UK government. But he also said, as to what we expect, full implementation of the withdrawal agreement, full implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol, as you were just hearing, so that sticking point. So really, the hopes of a new beginning are tied to and could be crushed by the Brexit negotiations. So those are the main reactions at the moment. unsurprisingly, and obviously Liz Truss in the last few weeks asked if President Macron, a well-known Europhile and also the President of France, is he friend or foe. She said the jury is still out. Now the Truss camp after that said it was a joke and that shouldn't be taken too seriously, and obviously she was looking to impress an audience of UK Conservative members, and I think making jokes at the expense of the French always goes down well with that crowd. But the reaction in Brussels at the moment is more that there are things to be negotiated, there are things to be discussed that are absolutely no laughing matter. As you said, the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which she championed through Parliament, a big factor there. So there's also some alignment, and that'll be part of the reaction, alignment with Ukraine, alignment with condemning Russia's actions, but also alignment on energy cooperation. The cost of living crisis and the energy crisis will be quite serious and quite important. So muted reaction at the moment, and mostly linked to the Brexit negotiations, as you'd expect.
So the hope for new beginnings then, because the relationship between the EU and Boris Johnson hasn't always been an easy one, has it?
No, it hasn't, and I think there's very much some capital in British politics of making the scapegoating the EU. And as I said, the spokesperson saying today, we're always welcoming new beginnings, but that is very much tied to the Brexit negotiations. So I think, and also German politicians in the last few days saying anybody who believed that things could not get any worse after Boris Johnson may have been proved wrong by some of Liz Truss's comments. So not a warm welcome in Brussels for the Truss government. Also, as you heard in the speech, Liz Truss didn't mention the EU at all, but she did mention an election in 2024, so a little bit earlier than it needed to be in 2025 or in January 2025. So there might be an opportunity for the Truss camp there to use the European Union and antagonising the European Union as a political football to animate their political base in the UK. So at the moment, if you're hoping to channel the spirit of the Entente Cordiale to see a net improvement of relationship between Brussels, France and London, you might need to wait a little bit longer.
Alex, many thanks. Our correspondent Alex Cadier in Brussels. Well, this marks the end of a 3-year journey as UK Prime Minister for Boris Johnson. So it's farewell, but is it goodbye? Johnson has refused to rule out a return to power during what was his farewell tour across the UK. Our correspondent Michael Voss reports from London.
Boris Johnson's campaign to back Brexit helped win the 2016 referendum. It later helped this controversial, charismatic politician achieve the post he's always aspired to, Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Known simply as Boris, he soon showed that he was prepared to bend the rules, suspending Parliament to limit debate over his Brexit strategy, a move ruled unlawful by the Supreme Court. In the end, he called an early election on the promise to get Brexit done.
We have a deal with the EU that is ready to go. It is oven ready, as I never tire of it. You just put it in the microwave and there it is.
He won a resounding victory, giving the Conservatives the biggest majority they'd had in decades, and in January 2020 he delivered the UK's exit from the European Union. But his political ambitions were swiftly derailed by COVID. The government faced a barrage of criticism for failing to grasp the severity of the outbreak as the virus first spread across Europe. That soon changed, with the government ordering a strict national lockdown backed by a substantial financial aid package. He also acted decisively in approving the first mass COVID vaccination programme in the world, a shot in the arm which boosted his ratings. Then came the war in Ukraine. Johnson acted swiftly to offer both military and political backing, making regular trips there in support of President Volodymyr Zelensky. Back at home, though, his premiership was increasingly dogged by accusations of sleaze and poor judgment. A series of parties held at his official Downing Street residence during lockdown appeared to break the government's own COVID laws. The police intervened in the Partygate scandal, with Boris Johnson becoming the first sitting British Prime Minister to be fined for breaking the law.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices, and I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead.
Once named Teflon for his ability to brush off scandals, in the end, public opinion turned against him, his ratings so toxic that his own party forced him to resign.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister.
As the leadership contest to replace him got underway, Johnson almost disappeared from public life. The opposition called his government missing in action as the country struggles with rampant inflation and soaring energy prices. For the moment, Johnson remains an MP and could earn millions on the speaking circuit and by writing his memoirs. In its farewell address to Parliament, though, there were hints that he's planning a comeback.
Hasta la vista, baby. Thank you.
Michael Voss, CGTN, London.
So the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss becomes the new leader of the UK Conservative Party, winning 57% of the vote and taking over from Boris Johnson. She faces a very full in-tray when she becomes the new Prime Minister on Tuesday. She has to deal with the cost of living crisis, high inflation and looming strikes. In her acceptance speech, she promised to cut taxes, to grow the economy and tackle the long-term energy supply, and said that she would deliver, deliver, deliver for the country. And that is it from us here in London. We'll be back for continuing coverage on our shows at 14 and 15 GMT and in Global Business Europe at 16 GMT. Thank you very much for watching. For now, from all of the team here in London, goodbye.